Hello, friends. So, once again, I welcome you on the virtual platform. Friends, I have discussed the polarization of an isolated atom as well as isolated molecules in my previous class. And I said that the polarization of a molecule is a complex process, and I have described the process of polarization in the case of molecule. Today, we would like to understand the polarization, and we want to understand a very important physical quantity, that's a vector quantity, which is known as the polarization vector, or sometimes it is referred as polarization density vector. So, let me explain what is a polarization vector. So in order to understand the polarization vector, let us consider that you have a dielectric slab. So here you look at this figure. I have a dielectric slab, and this slab is basically made up of atom or molecules. So you have a group of atoms and group of molecules, and you can characterize these atoms and molecules by its atomic density or a molecular density. I mean to say that number of atoms per unit volume of a substance. Generally, if you take a crystal, then the order of the atomic density is of the order of 10 to the power of 22 to 10 to the power of 23 atoms per unit volume per cc, I would say. If you take a crystal and if you take then atomic density, you will get the number 10 to the power of 22 to 10 to the power of 23 per cc, that is per cubic centimeter. So if you have a such sample, I mean to say the dielectric sample, uh, and the atoms, which you can see that each atom possess a tiny dipole moment, because you have polar molecules or polar, because you see when you have some molecules, heteronuclear molecule, these molecules are having a permanent dipole moment. So let us consider that you have a sample which is made up of molecules, and the molecules are polar molecules. So if the molecules are polar molecules, they possess a permanent dipole moment. If the molecules are not polar molecule, then you don't have a permanent dipole moments. And if you keep such sample in the electric field, then the molecules are polarized, and there will be induced dipole moment in each case of molecule. Similarly, if you have a solid which is made up of an atoms, right? And if such solid is kept in the uniform electric field, each atom will be polarized, right? And you know that there will be a induced dipole moment for each atom, and you will have an expression for induced dipole moment is equal to the polarizability alpha into the applied electric field strength. So let us consider now, once you have this brief idea about the dipole moments, and each molecule is treated as a tiny dipole. So here you see that this arrow which I have mentioned is representing a dipole. This arrow generally is considered as the head of the dipole, and this is the tail of a dipole. And this arrow indicates the direction of a dipole moment, because if the direct dipole moment is a vector quantity, it has a direction, and the direction of a dipole moment is always from negative charge to the positive charge. So this head of the dipole here, you consider there will be a positive charge, and this, suppose if you consider this a tail of a dipole, this considers as a negative charge. So all dipoles, all basically the molecules, and each molecule behaves like a tiny dipole having the dipole moment. So all the molecular dipoles are randomly oriented. You see that orientations are different. Certain molecules, certain dipoles are oriented along x direction. Certain molecules, certain dipoles are oriented along y direction. So that the distribution of the dipole moment, the orientation of the dipole moment is completely random. So in that case, if you take the vector sum of each individual dipole per unit volume, suppose here if there are n dipoles, okay, per unit volume, then if you take the vector sum of the induced dipole moment of each dipole, so if I have a dipole number 1, you take its dipole moment P1. You have a dipole number 2, you take its dipole moment P2, P3, Pn, because there are 10 raised to 22 dipoles. So P1 plus P2 plus P3 plus P4 plus P5 plus P6 and so on. You calculate the vector sum of, not an algebraic sum, vector sum of all individual dipole per unit volume, then you will get the value 0, right? Because there is no orientation. All dipoles are randomly oriented. But now if you apply the electric field, and if the sample is subjected in this uniform electric field, you see I applied electric field here, and my electric field is applied along x direction. So you can say that your electric field is not 0 here. In this case, your electric field is 0. But in this case, your electric field is not 0. So your electric field is uniform. It is having a constant magnitude and in the same direction. Now, in that case, all your dipoles will experience a torque. You see, we have discussed the behavior of a dipole in a uniform electric field. So each dipole will experience a torque, and because of this torque, the dipole will rotate, and because of this torque, your dipole will align along the field direction. So here you can see this effect of uniform electric field is that the dipoles are oriented along the x-axis, but this orientation, you see there are slightly because of the thermal agitations and vibration, you can see that they're not totally inclined along the x-axis, but there is some disalignment because of these thermal agitations and vibration that we will discuss. And we will understand the contribution of the thermal vibration in detail. But right now we can say that the uniform electric field, and because of this uniform electric field, there is an alignment, more or less there is an alignment of the dipole along the direction of the applied electric field, and each dipole is aligning along the direction of the field. And in that case, you will see the vector sum. You see, in the absence of electric field, the vector sum is 0. But in presence of the electric field, your vector sum is not 0. So we can say that the material becomes polarized. Your material is polarized. Here, the entire material is polarized. And measure of this effect of polarization is characterized by a vector quantity which is known as a polarization density vector. So polarization density vector is basically indicates how far your material is polarized. And now let us define this vector. So this vector is defined as the polarization vector P. You see, I have given the symbol. It is a capital vector P, and basically it is defined as dipole moment per unit volume. So it is basically a dipole moment per unit volume. So you see When you see this ratio, if you so I here see I wrote the magnitude of a dipole moment. You write down this. A magnitude of the polarization vector is a ratio of a dipole moment per unit volume. So if you find out the dimension of the polarization vector or polarization or a polarization density, it is basically calculated. You know that dipole moment is has a dimension coulomb into meter, and we have the volume we measure in meter cube. So it is a coulomb meter upon meter cube. So the unit of a polarization vector is coulomb per meter square, while unit of a induced dipole moment is a coulomb into meter. Please remember here I am using a letter capital P is indicating a polarization density vector or a polarization vector, while a small letter p indicates induced dipole moment whose dimension is coulomb into meter. And induced dipole moment, it is basically a product of magnitude of a charge into the distance between two equal unlike charges of a dipole. So now once you understand this concept of the induced dipole moment and the polarization vector, you see there are two expressions which we can write. The vector p, that is the induced dipole moment, letter p, small p, is the induced dipole moment and is equal to alpha times E, which we have already developed in my first lecture, and I gave you the concept of atomic polarizability. So this is a constant, and we have discussed the role of atomic polarizability. And basically, you know that if you know alpha, you can also say something about the polarization of an atom or a polarization of a molecule. Now you can see that there is another expression which I wrote here, vector P. You see this is the vector P, this is representing the polarization density vector, and here this is the induced dipole moment. They are related. So I can write down vector P is equal to n times induced dipole moment vector P. Here you see this n is nothing but number of atoms or number of molecules per unit volume. Look at this expression here. You see this expression. Now you will realize this expression. This expression, you look at this. This is vector P1 plus vector P2 plus vector P3 plus vector Pn, right? And in this case, all dipoles are identical, so the dipoles moments are same, the directions are same. So we may write down vector p1 equal to vector p2 equal to vector p3 equal to vector p4 equal to vector p5 equal to vector pn equal to, say, small letter p. So we can write down p again. So again, for dipole number one, your dipole moment is p. Dipole number two, if a dipole moment is 4, dipole number three, the dipole number is again p. So you have to go for n times. So if you take that vector sum, you will nothing. It is nothing but n times induced dipole moment of each dipole. So you please remember that this is the relation, that your vector p is related with the induced dipole moment. And once you understand these two relationships of the induced dipole moment and the polarization density vector, we can establish a very important law of polarization. And let us understand the law of polarization which we would like to discuss. Now you consider a dielectric slab. You see here I consider a dielectric slab. Basically it was considered a cross-sectional area. Now I consider to explain the meaning of polarization and to explain the polarization density vector. To consider a dielectric slab whose area of cross section is A. So if you take the area of cross section, if you see this face and if you take the area of cross section of this face, suppose this point is A, B, C and D. I'm talking about this point. This is point A, this is point B, this is point C, this is point D. So if you take the cross-sectional area of this face ABCD, it will be equal to letter A. So which I wrote here A. And you know the linear dimension of this dielectric slab which I consider is L. It is linear dimension of the dielectric. That means the distance between the two consecutive faces is L. So the volume of this dielectric slab will be equal to A times L. This is simple. So this you know that the volume of this dielectric slab is AL. Now this dielectric slab, let us keep this dielectric slab in the uniform electric field. When you keep this dielectric slab in the uniform electric field, there will be a polarization and the dielectric slab will be polarized. And if it is polarized, then this polarization is characterized by the polarization density vector P. So now we want to find out how to compute a polarization density vector for a given dielectric material. So to understand this, you let us see this picture that as soon as you switch on your electric field, the dipoles of the sample which are not oriented along the field direction, but because of the application of the electric field, your dipole will orient. So you see, these are the arrays of dipole which I said. You look at this figure in and two dimension, you can see the dipole were disoriented. And now you apply the electric field. Once you apply the electric field, you see there is a alignment of the dipole. So dipoles are aligning along the field direction. Here, you please consider that I have applied the electric field along x direction. So the alignment of the dipole is along x direction. Each dipole is aligning, and dipole is becoming dipole moment is aligning with the field line. So it's making angle theta equal to 0, right? So it becomes parallel with the uniform electric field. And you can see that these dipoles are arranged and there is a periodic arrangement of atoms in a solid or a molecules in a solid. So arrangement is regular. There is a periodic arrangement. So as such, you know, dielectric slab is electrically neutral. That means there is no excess positive charge, there is no excess negative charge anywhere in the species. Everywhere the charges are distributed and the entire sample is electrically neutral. But once you apply the polarization, because of this polarization, the dipoles are aligning, and because of this alignment of the dipole, you see inside the dielectric material, each dipole head, see this is the head of a dipole, is followed by the dipole, another dipole tail. So I mean to say that each head of a dipole is followed by the tail. Look at this. This is the head followed by the tail. Again, this is the head followed by the tail. This is the head followed by the tail. So inside the interior, let us say inside the volume of the dielectric material, each dipole positive charge is compensated by its nearest neighbor negative charge. So the positive charge is accompanied by negative charges. So as such, you see that there is a electrical neutrality. Uh, but if you look at the phases of the dielectric material, you look at this phase. This I said the phase A, B, C, D. This phase, you see there is an accumulation of a negative charges. These negative charges does not have a neighbor outside the species, right? Similarly, exactly opposite to the phase A, B, C, D, you have a phase D, E, F, G. This phase. So this phase, you see there is a accumulation of positive charges, and these positive charges are not having any neighbor outside the sample. So this positive charge does not have any neighbor outside the specimen, outside the dielectric material. So can I say that this phase A, B, C, D is having the negative charges? These charges which are accumulated over that surface is because of the polarization. As soon as you switch off your electric field, this charge will disappear. So these charges are static charges. These charges are considered as bound charges. They are not moving, they are stationary, they are fixed in the crystal, they are fixed over the surface of, because there is an accumulation. So they are fixed over the surface of the crystal, over the face of this crystal. These charges are fictitious. These charges are imaginary charges. These charges are known as polarization charges, and it is referred as a bound charges. So, if this is the bound charges, these charges are characterized by a surface charge density, and it is known as surface charge density of the bound charges, polarization charges, and that is why we give the symbol sigma b. So here see I wrote a letter sigma and the B is subscript. This sigma B is basically representing surface charge density of the bound charges. And this is basically this is due to because of electric field. Moment this electric field is switch off, then sigma B will be 0. So if you want to calculate total charge accumulated over the phase A, B, C, D, you can multiply sigma B with the area cross section of this phase. So area cross section of this phase is A, and sigma B is the surface charge density, that is the total charge per unit area. So if you multiply by sigma B into A, you will get total accumulated polarized charge over the phase A, B, C, D, and I gave the negative sign because these are the negative charges. So similarly, this sample is electrically neutral. If it is electrically neutral, there should be exactly opposite positive charges because they should compensate. So you see that the other side, which is I mentioned, the shaded part, this shaded area, there is a accumulation of the positive charges. These positive charges are again a polarized charges. These polarized charges, surface charge density sigma b. So the total positive charges accumulated over this shaded area is given by sigma BA with a plus sign because both the signs have opposite polarity. So you can see that in the presence of uniform electric field, your dielectric slab is behaving like a dipole because this is working as the negative pole of the dipole. This phase is working as a negative pole of the dipole, and this phase is working as a positive phase of the dipole. So your dipole, this dielectric slab is behaving like a dipole. If it is behaving like a dipole, then it has a dipole moment. So let us calculate the dipole moment and we will calculate the magnitude of a dipole moment. So you see the dipole moment of this slab is basically behaves as a dipole. So dipole moment is the charge into the distance. So charge over each phase is sigma b over a. But here we don't take the sign because we have to take the magnitude of a charge. So this is the magnitude of a charge sigma b into a, and you look at this, L is a linear dimension. Basically it is measuring the distance between the two equal unlike charges because this is the negative charge accumulation, this is the positive charge accumulation. So this is the distance between the two poles, dipole, there are two poles. So this is the distance is L. So you have the dipole moment of the slab is sigma b a, which is multiplied by with the linear dimension, that is the distance between the two unlike charges. And now you know that sigma b ui, it is known surface bound charge density. And now you see we have the expression for a polarization density vector. Polarization density vector is nothing but the dipole moment per unit volume. So it is P divided by AL. Here you have to take the magnitude of a vector, small magnitude of a p, right? Polarization, that is dipole moment per unit volume. Volume is A into L. So using this P, which we have calculated that this magnitude of P is sigma B A into L. So the numerator is a dipole moment. The dipole moment of a dielectric slab, and that is sigma B A L. And now you have the volume. Volume is A into L. So A into L, the numerator you have A into L, and the denominator you have A. So they will cancel each other. So one can say that the magnitude of a polarization vector or a magnitude of polarization density vector is always equal to the magnitude of a surface charge density of the bound charges. So sigma b is always is equal to magnitude of polarization vector. But since your vector p is a vector quantity, let us represent p in the vectorial form. So to represent p, that is the vector p, polarization vector p, polarization density vector p, in a vectorial form, look at your diagram number one first of all. With this diagram, look at this your vector p, because you see this vector p is the vector sum of all each individual dipole, and you see that since your dielectric slab is exactly symmetrical, it is cubic, so you can see that there is a unit vector n caret I represent, and this is the unit vector n caret is representing the unit vector in the direction of your area vector, which you know the area vector. So because this is the area vector is represent, you are familiar with an area vector when I taught you the Gauss's law, right? So this area vector, if you see that your vector n is in the direction of area vector, and area vector is the direction of an external normal which you draw over the face B, E, F, G. So in this case, you see your vector P is making angle theta equal to 0 with the unit vector, which is projected along the direction of the area vector. So your vector p is parallel with the unit vector which you draw externally, which you draw which is a no, which is basically an external normal to the area D, E, F, G. So in that case, your vector p is parallel with the unit vector n, right? And now you look at the case that sometime your sample is not always having a cubic structure, or it is irregular, or your face which I mentioned. Look at this, look at this area cross sectional. This cross sectional area is a perfectly square, right? That is why when you draw external normal over this shaded area, the external normal will be always parallel to the direction of P. And your unit vector n is always in the direction of an external normal which is drawn over the shaded area. Now, if your sample, this particular face, the shaded part, is not always regular, and suppose it is inclined, and suppose you see that picture is something like this. Suppose the face in two dimension I have mentioned. In that case, you see that if the face is not exactly square, and if it is inclined, then you look at that your vector p, that is the polarization vector p, is not exactly parallel with the unit vector n, but your vector p is making angle theta with an external normal which you draw over the face. So your this angle is theta. So in that case, we will now generalize this expression. You see that when you see that when you consider that irregularity in that sample, or you can see that when your vector p is not making angle is making angle theta with an external normal. In this case, you know that the surface charge density of the bound charges will change because that area is changing here. Because the area of this face, when it was a regular, it was the area of that face, this is the shaded area, it is capital A. The moment you introduce the deformation in that area, right? I make this area inclined. Then this area will not be equal to A, but the area of this shaded part, will be have some new value. If the new value of this area is represented by A dash. Okay, so if the area is changing, then you have the surface charge density of the bound charges will change. So you will have a sigma B dash. So the sigma B dash will be the charge. You see, this is the charge per area. The charge will be the same because you see, you have your specimen. Specimen is a type of specimen is same. Suppose you have considered a crystal of Teflon, or suppose you have considered a crystal of some dielectric material, right? So the molecular density is same. As molecular density is same, number of dipoles per unit volume is same. So charge accumulated on the faces of these dielectric slab, either you have a regular face or you have the irregular phase, the charge accumulation will be the same. So the sigma b into A, either you have a regular phase or a irregular phase, sigma b into A will remain always same because charge and there is a conservation of charges also. So charge remains same, but the area is changing. So your new surface charge density of the bound charges will be charge per unit area, and the area is A dash. So you have a sigma b dash equal to now sigma b A upon A dash. If A equal to A dash, then sigma B dash equal to sigma. If A dash is equal to A, but A dash is not always equal to A. But now you have a relation. You see this relation one can derive that the area A, the original area A is always equal to A dash cos theta. If theta is 0, A is equal to A dash. Correct? If theta is 0 means if vector P is along the direction of unit vector n, then A is equal to always A dash. So if you use this relation A is equal to A dash cos theta, so you can see the sigma B dash, the numerator is sigma B, so I write down sigma B, and A equal to A dash cos theta, so I write down A dash cos theta divided by A dash. So what we have derived is sigma B dash is equal to sigma b into cos theta. And sigma b is nothing but a polarization density vector. Generally, we derive this vector p is nothing but polarization density. So sigma b is polarization density vector. So it's the magnitude of p. So this is the magnitude of a vector p, magnitude of vector p into cos theta. So this is p cos theta, and p cos theta can be represented by a vector scalar product of two vector p with a unit vector n. Because this is, if you take this scalar product, so p dot vector n, that is a unit vector n caret, that is p and cos theta, and magnitude of unit vector is 1. So it is p cos theta, and p is sigma b, so it is sigma b cos theta. So what we can say that sigma b dash equal to p into n, p dot n, scalar product. And if you see theta is equal to 0, then sigma b dash equal to sigma b. So more generally, we can write down that, please remember that the surface charge density of the bound charges is always equal to the scalar product of vector p with a unit vector n. So this is a very important law which you have to remember, and we have to use this particular expression in various numerical problems. So today I have discussed how to compute polarization density vector P, and I have already explained the existence of polarization charges, bound charges, and we have relate how we have got a relationship between the bound charges with the polarization density vector. So this is a one important law which you have to remember. And now let us work out for another case, that sometime when the sample is irregular, and if the sample is non-homogeneous, I would say that its atomic density is, there is a change in atomic density, or you may have a case where electric field is non-uniform. So in that cases, again you have some polarization charges are produced inside the volume of the polarization charges. So let us consider that you have some uh, irregular specimen. You have a specimen of a dielectric material. You may have a material like Teflon crystal or Teflon material or a plastic or a mica plate. And when you keep such specimen in the electric field, and if the electric field is non-uniform, and you see that electric field is having a radially outward direction, here I have mentioned that you have a radially outward electric field, and this electric field is changing like your point charge. If you have a point charge, it produces the electric field. The electric field produced by the point charge is a radially outward direction, and you know that electric field of that point charge is given by expression kq divided by r square. So as you move away from the point charge, the electric field is decreasing, and the rate of decrease is as 1 upon r square. So here you see that I have a sample, and I have basically it's kept in a non-uniform electric field. The electric field is radially outward direction, and because the uniform, there is no uniformity in the electric field. In certain region the polarization is stronger, in other region polarization is weaker. So because of that, each head of the dipole is not always accompanied by the tail of a dipole, so there will be no charge neutrality, and because of that there could be some positive net charge is produced, or some negative net charge is induced in the specimen because of the non-uniform electric field, or ununiform or inhomogeneous crystal. So you have a process of induction of some polarization charges because of the non-uniform electric field. So here I have mentioned that, let's say that for an example, I have mentioned that because of the non-uniform nature of the electric field, there are some four negative charges are induced. So these four negative charges are induced. So this is, you see that your specimen is electrically neutral. There could not be any excess charges. There could not be any excess negative charges. There cannot be excess positive charges. So if that means that if some negative charges are induced in the interior of the dielectric material, there should be exactly equal amount of positive charge. It should induce somewhere over the surface of the specimen. So you see that these negative charges which is induced because of the polarization, and these negative charges, because it is electrically neutral, there should be exactly equal opposite charges, and that they will also it will be induced over the surface of the dielectric material. So now to calculate these induced charges inside the dielectric material, and to calculate these induced charges, the bound charges over the surface of the dielectric material, we have to apply the concept of surface charge density as well as the bound charge density. So now we will define another important physical quantity which is known as volume charge density of the bound charges, because the bound charges are induced, are generated in the crystal because of the non-uniformity of the electric field. These are the bound charges. These are again fixed charges. These charges are not moving, they are fixed in the crystal, they are static in the crystal, but they are observed, they are found in the interior of the dielectric material. They are found in the volume. So now we want to characterize by a factor that is known as the volume charge density. So if rho b, then, so we define the rho as basically a volume charge density, and when you put a subscript b, so it indicates rho b. So rho b is basically measuring the volume charge density of the bound charges, where we represent the bound charges. So now you see, once you know rho b, so if you consider a volume element d tau, if you consider a small volume element d tau, so the total charge accumulated in that volume will be equal to rho b into d tau. You know, this is we have done many times, so you remember that bound charge in volume d tau is rho b into d tau. So now if you want to find out the total charge, total bound charge in the interior of the dielectric material, you have to integrate, because there are, you have to divide into volume elements. So you have to take rho b d tau 1 plus rho b d tau 2 plus rho b d tau 3 plus rho b d tau 4 and so on. So you take this addition, is basically you have to integrate the charge density, that is the volume charge density, over the volume of the dielectric material. So if you take the volume integration of the charge density over the volume occupied by the dielectric material, you will get total bound charges. So this expression is known to you. So you have this expression. So total bound charges. So total bound charges, this will be the negative charges in our case. So these charges are these are computed with the help of this expression. And now you know there is exactly opposite positive charges is produced over the surface. So now we want to calculate over the surface. So we require a surface charge density. So surface charge density, we know it is sigma. So if I take sigma b, that is the charge density per unit area. So if I have an area dA, so it will be sigma b into dA. So the total charge accumulated over the area of the dielectric material is sigma b dA. And if I want to calculate total over the total surface area of the material, you integrate sigma b dA over the entire surface. So you see, so this is basically giving you the surface bound charges. The surface bound charges and total bound charges in magnitude are same, but their sign is opposite. Correct. So you compare them. So I compare both the charges. The total surface bound charges is always equal to the total volume bound charges, but these charges are having opposite nature. So we write down a minus sign. So this minus sign indicates that both the charges are equal, but they are having a different magnitude. The charges are in opposite in nature, so I have put a negative sign. And now you see, dear friend, we remember sigma b, and sigma b is basically a surface density, and sigma b is always equal to the scalar product of vector p with a vector n. You see this expression we have derived. So I put this sigma b here is equal to the scalar product of vector p with n. You see sigma b, for sigma b I kept this value vector p dot n, and you have a dA, that is the area element dA. So it is dA is equal to minus rho b d tau. Now you see, n n is the unit vector in the direction of area vector dA. So you can write this product vector unit vector n into dA is nothing but the area vector dA. So this is your area vector dA. So this is basically a scalar product of P with a vector area vector dA is equal to the volume integration of the charge density of the volume charge density rho b. And now you see, you can this expression, look at this expression, and this is basically a surface integration. And you know that surface integration, it can be converted into the volume integration using the Gauss law, which we have studied. So this particular expression P dot dA over the surface integration is replaced by the divergence of P over the volume. This is basically, you see, what is the Gauss theorem indicates that. I'm sorry, yes, Gauss theorem indicates that if you have any vector function and if you integrate that vector function over the entire surface, that means if you take the surface integration of any vector function over the entire surface is always equal to the volume integration of a divergence of that vector function which is taken over the entire volume which is enclosed by the same surface. Once again, I'm repeating. If you have a surface integration of any vector function, here the vector function is phi. So surface integration of a vector function p over the surface is always equal to the volume integration of the divergence of the same vector function, that is a vector function p, over the volume which is enclosed by the same surface. So you know this p dot dA is now written as volume integration of divergence of p d tau equal to minus d, you have a volume integration of the charge density. So you see that the left hand side is a volume integration, right hand side is the volume integrated. You are integrating over the volume by the same surface. Here also you are integrating over the volume by the same surface, because both the surface, both this volume integration is enclosed by the same surface. So you can combine both the integrations, and ultimately you can write the final expression that divergence of a vector p, that is divergence of a polarization vector p, is always equal to negative, is always equal to negative sign. Negative is equal to minus volume charge density. Volume charge density of the bound charges. So today we have derived two important law of polarization, that surface charge density of the bound charges is always equal to the scalar product of vector p with a unit vector n, or you can write the magnitude of sigma b is always equal to magnitude of a polarization vector p. And here we have found that divergence of a polarization vector is always equal to negative value of volume charge density of the bound charges. So today, friends, I have given a important derivations about the computation of a surface charge density of the bound charges, as well as volume volume charge density of the bound charges, which are considered as the polarization charges. So here I will stop here, and the next lecture we will study the physical interpretation of the surface charges as well as bound charges. Thank you very much.